All right, hello everyone. I wanted to put together some sand wedge tutorials for you guys. So this is going to be very similar format to what you guys saw with the rough iron. If you haven't checked that video out, you probably want to do it as well. This club in particularly is going to be one of the toughest clubs in the entire game to play. I look at sand wedge and wedge as the two toughest clubs in the entire game of Golf Clash. What you'll see is most guys just don't think about secondary wind effect, and they definitely don't think about it as the same scale as comparing it to like a driver or a wood, for example, or long iron. You'll find that the sand wedge needs to play even more significant amount of wind effect. Where and how much, it's very, very, very challenging to say specifically. But what I would do is I'm typically, let's say we have a 10 mile per hour wind, for example, pointed towards the side. How much wind effect is that 10 miles per hour going to implement on the ball? It's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 or 6 green grids minimum. And that in lies as to why most people make mistakes, is because they're not offsetting that ball guide enough, or overcorrecting, for example, to accommodate for all that secondary wind effect. So what you're going to see most guys do is they're going to underplay the wind. It's more than anything, they're just underplaying the secondary wind effect. Now, what you'll see is the Golf Clash notebook tool. We have, recently in the last 2 months, we have updated every sand wedge value, every rough iron value in the entire tool. So whether you're using Spitfire, Malibu 6, whatever you're using, the new and improved numbers are very, very reliable for giving you kind of the best data that we've had up until this point. So for the last 2 or so months, the numbers have been very, very good. There's a good chance that if you're having problems, you're doing one of two things wrong. You're either not considering the secondary wind effect, or the other thing is you're not considering the elevation. When you guys go through these tutorials, you're going to see how many bunker shots are uphill. And why does that happen? Because sand is lower ground. That means coming out of bunkers, you're almost always going to be shooting back uphill. So what most guys will do is they might not play the -5, -10, -15% adjustments that they need to do. How much you'll need to use is dependent upon the slope, the severity of the slope. You'll try to analyze, where is my ball going to land and where is my current height? If they seem to be kind of the same height by looking at the take shot view and kind of going out of take shot view, then you'll not use any elevation. But there's going to be very few times that actually comes into play. I mean, you can watch all these videos I put together for you. I might have only had 1 or 2 of those total where there's no such thing as elevation. It's a very, very isolated case. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that guys will also be making. And the data that I built, kind of implied, once I found the data and got it into the app here, I needed to make sure that it was more standardized. So what you'll see is, Spitfire 7, for example, is, the longest, most accurate in the game. You're going to find that the number is still going to play very, very close to 1 per ring, much more close than I ever thought it was. So, that whole correlation between rough irons and sand wedges and, having kind of a different scale of accuracy, you'll actually find that the sand wedge is actually very, very close to that true value. I think I found the base sand wedge to be maybe about 1.1 per ring. So it's about 10% different. But that's still pretty close. For example, putting on a power 4 ball, power 5 ball, you're actually going to find that it actually, starts closing that gap. The sand wedge actually does play very, very close to 1 per ring. It's very, very close. However, you'll see scenarios where it might be -10% uphill. So you actually need to take off some of that adjustment. So that's where the elevation tool will come into play, and that's what you'll be using. Now, The last thing that I just want to talk to you guys about before, introducing you to the videos that I put together for you guys is I just want to talk about setting up a procedure. You'll see that there's a certain protocol that my shots go about. The first thing that I do is I try to judge the take shot view. I'm going to figure out, is my ball uphill? Because you're going to see that you might need to do that quite significantly. Use minus 5%, use minus 10%. You're going to see a lot of bunkers require this. And the take shot view is going to be your number one way to tell whether or not your landing zone is going to be influenced by that. Aside from that, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm always going to drag to the max line. Where is the max line? I need to be looking kind of where I'm going to be pulling to and landing the ball. And if it looks like about 70%, then I'm going to, kind of store that in my mind. And I'm going to say, I'm going to use 70% for my land zone. However, that's not necessarily the slider position you want to be using. You need to consider, am I in a tailwind? Am I in a headwind? And how severe is the wind? Because let's say I need to still pull to max club because there's 10 ring adjustment that I have to make. If that's the case and I end up, it appears that I'm going to have to pull towards max, I'm going to need to use that slider positioning towards the 100% because that's the true shot of the distance. It's not where you're trying to land. That's not true distance. True distance is wherever you pull the target to. If you don't believe me, the easiest way to understand this concept, if I changed and pulled the slider all the way back to my feet, right? I pulled it the whole way down. Am I changing the shot's distance? And the short answer is yes. So anything that you do with the distance slider, the true distance of the shot is wherever I pull the distance with the bullseye to. It's always going to be the distance of the shot. Because that's the case, using the slider any differently than that, you're always using the slider wrong if you're just thinking about where the ball is going to land. It's not where the ball is going to land. It's wherever you need to pull the rings to. If I'm at 70% club and I need to pull back to 50, the shot's distance is only 50% because I've pulled the slider back. I've pulled the target back to the 50% mark. So that's the shot's true distance. Similarly applies, if I pulled it back all the way to my feet, you'd see, I might have a 1% distance. That's the slider I need to use. That's the easiest way for you guys to understand that concept, that the shot's true distance is wherever you pull the slider to. So always be thinking about that because it's a very important one to use. On that note, I'm going to, let you guys at it at the videos. Be sure that you're thinking about that secondary wind effect. That's going to be the hardest concept for you guys to learn. Also keep in mind of things like half club. So for instance, how I just mentioned at the beginning of this video, that I use roughly maybe for a 10 mile per hour side wind, I might offset the ball guide 5 or 6 green grids. In addition to that, let's say we're at 50% club. Well, that means half the wind. So I should probably be offsetting my guide about half the ball guide offset. I might offset it 3 grids in that situation. Similarly is going to apply, down towards quarter club. So let me just talk about this just briefly. If I was to input 10, I want to show you these values because there you'll see the max ring value is 9 rings on a Spitfire 6 with 1 Powerball. Mid is going to be defined by basically 50% club. Min club is going to be essentially 25% club. So that value that you see there at min is going to be traditionally read as quarter club, which is 2.2 rings. So that's 25%. So if I was to pull this down to 25%, you should see essentially the exact same adjustment, less round off error. Aside from that, it's going to be very, very straightforward. You'll see that the min value becomes 0. Why is that? Because if I'm touching the slider, I can physically pull a sand wedge all the way back to my foot. Do you guys agree that I can pull it all the way down to my foot and hit a 0% shot? That's why slider, the new min value becomes 0 as soon as you touch the slider. That's the biggest, thing that you know, guys think the tool's broken. It's not broken. You need to think about this actual shot here. If I can pull the sand wedge all the way back to my foot, that's new min. It's 0%. So if you ever need to restore it, you'll just need to hit that reset button right there. And you can see I can restore and get that old min back by doing that. If I wanted to say, you know, that's quarter club, and I just want to use, say I just wanted to, you know, quick do this and say, oh, I just want to use 20%. I'll just go 2 rings, for example. You know, you can easily see that when you restore it by hitting the reset button. So good luck, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. All right, here we are, guys. Let's take a look at this one. First thing that I'm going to do, figure out, is it uphill? It looks like it is. You'll find oftentimes they are. Next, you know, I might just try to scan, figure out, you know, it looks like I'm landing maybe right around 50% club. So I may use slider positioning, very close to that. Other than that, we're going to need to just play wind effect. So you'll probably see that I might just try to offset this guide. Similarly, you can see it's a very, very large wind, so you can see with kind of where and how much I'm offsetting my guide. Other than that, it's going to hopefully come down to perfect ball timing and, you know, fractions of inches. But it looks like my timing there was absolutely horrendous. It's going to definitely shoot left. But you could see, you know, with perfect ball, we would have given ourselves a really good chance there. All right, let's take a look at this one, guys. Another sand shot for you. Let's see what it looks like. First thing that I'll do is try to test the elevation. And you'll see again, once again, uphill, very, very common theme that you'll see here. So power 0 ball, 10.2, side wind, very close to maybe 80% club, I'm thinking. So maybe do something like this. Other than this, you'll need to be considering things like wind effect. So you'll see that I'll probably offset this guide kind of similar to this. Maybe 5.5 rings here. And there you can see perfect ball. Again, you know, the importance of wind effect. You can see that I'm going towards the hole. It's cutting so far to the right. So keep in mind that I pointed maybe 4 green grids to the left on that 10 wind up that hill, and I still land. Now you can see that it pretty much landed on the fringe where I wanted it to. However, what most players are going to do is they're going to not consider wind effect. So always make sure you're thinking about that, especially for sand wedge. The arc is super high and side winds are really going to push that ball. All right, let's take a look at this shot here. First thing that we'll do is we'll check, see where we are in the mid-max span. See if we're uphill. It looks like it is slightly uphill. I'm going to play it that way. I will be pulling very, very close to max. Probably actually use the max. And you're also getting to see what it's like to play douches. So, hope you guys like, you know, playing guys like that. You can see they're real mature. They have the maturity of about a 10-year-old. So I'm going to use pretty much the max number, almost spot on. Other than that, I'm just going to play wind effect. Call it my perfect. So let's see if I hopefully could have maybe got a lucky bounce here. That's pretty good, but just off the target. It's going to come down to fractions of an inch, especially when we're talking about wind effect there. So, you know, just do the best that you can. And, you know, always be thinking about things like wind effect. All right, let's take a look at this one. You can see I got it over here to the bunker. Nice little side wind. We're going to figure out, looks like once again uphill. You're going to see this is a very, very common theme. So I'm thinking -5, -10, somewhere in that nature. You can also see maybe it's going to be somewhere up here towards maybe 70-ish% club. So, you know, maybe around 2.8-ish rings. Other than that, it'll be kind of ball guide offset. So you'll see that I'll try to maybe just offset that just slightly. 2.8 rings right in here. And you'll see how critical perfect ball is. If your timing's just a little bit off, here you can see it's just going to deflect out to the left. It's going to make it really, really tough. You got to really be on your game. As you can see with that great ball, you know, 2-ring great ball, it's going to cost you every time. So hopefully you guys have some precision there. Good luck, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right, another sand shot here. Let's take another look, see what the wind angle looks like. Here you can see it's going to be maybe just going a little bit into max. And you'll see that I'll try to utilize this side spin, maybe just a little bit of curl. I'll need to think about things like ball guide offset. You can see how it's pointed towards the hole, so I'm going to use some curl to kind of get this going back. Next thing, you know, make sure that you figure out about the elevation. We did have this hole already. But you can see right around 6 rings, and plus I probably want to land somewhere up in here. So I might, you know, consider that I already have gone 3 rings. I'm going to go 6 total. Other than that, I'm going to need curl, you know, for wind effect and also to get that ball guide going more in line. But you can see here, another great ball, probably going to push things a little bit too much to the left. Let's just see. Now I might have used maybe just a little bit too much curl. But you can see, you know, it gives you a very good general idea of, you know, how to play the hole. Perfect ball is going to be one of the most important. And you'll just need to kind of hone in on that curl a little bit, figuring out, you know, wind effect towards max club, stuff like this. You know, the stronger that wind gets, the more wind effect. You can see that the weight of my shot is very good, though. So you can see with the 3 rings that I went into Overpower, plus 3 adjusting back for that, you know, very, very close to that max ring adjustment. Gave me very, very good speed and pretty good result there. So good luck. I'll catch you on the next one. All right, here we are, everyone. Let's check out another viewpoint here. You can see I can just get it to the green. It's about 3 in the face. You'll see this one is significantly uphill. Common theme for these are that they're going to be uphill. I noticed it a lot when I was collecting the data. Here you'll see about 2 rings at max. So I may just try to position that. Try to land somewhere towards the front of the green here. You know, the big critical thing will be perfect ball, though. You'll need to make sure that you're kind of right on with that. You can see that I'm going to just try to position this up towards the hole. And, you know, I may even have to just slightly go into Overpower. So you can see that's what I'm doing with this. And it looks like I got my perfect ball. This is going to have at least a chance. Let's see. So just off the edge. You can see, you know, that was unfortunately a smaller wind. I've been trying to get, you know, bigger ones just so you can see. But, you know, there is some larger winds as well. With Tour 7, we just kind of never know how things are going to work out. Whether or not it's going to be a large wind or a small wind. I'm trying to keep the balls down as well. You can see that I'm using Marlin, so 15% or less. I'd like to keep the wind down, but also have a little bit of side spin just in case I need it. All right, let's take a look at this one. So another sand wedge shot here. Should be relatively close to max. Take a look at what they give us for the wind. Another kind of small one, but you know, we'll still work through the method here. You'll see, you know, once again, kind of uphill. It might kind of go up and then kind of dip back down a little bit. I'm going to use maybe minus 5% on this adjustment. Also, keep in mind, there's max. You know, I'll be maybe 80% pulling in just slightly, so I'm thinking somewhere around here. Other than that, I'm probably going to try to use this side hill. You can see I'm kind of limited on my backspin. So one of the things that you can do is try to just kind of slope it down to the hole this way, especially when you have very, very small backspin. So right around 2 rings. Won't need to consider too much about wind effect, but always be thinking about it. It's going to maybe, you know, jump forward just slightly. And just a great ball off to the right, but hopefully I, you know, accommodated enough. And here you can see it just shoots down the hill towards the hole, almost getting it to be able to fall there. So, you know, use that to your advantage. As you can see, even with a great ball, it kind of gave me a second opportunity there. And that's one of the main reasons to use the side hill there. All right, here we are, guys. Let's take a look at this one. First thing that you'll notice, you know, it's significantly uphill, probably 10-15%. This is probably one of the more severe ones. You'll also note, you know, there's probably a couple different ways to do this. I may try to just kind of curl this in. I have a very nice wind to do so. You may want to try to play this one semi-casual just to be careful. One thing I forgot to do, I forgot to put, I forgot to use the wind direction so you can see that it reset. Otherwise, if I didn't have more time, I probably would have just estimated and say, yeah, I'll just go 6 rings. Like, I'll be cool with that. It's going to come down to perfect ball. Just try to, be a little bit safer than sorry. So you can see, I go, I think I, may have gone maybe about 6 rings there, which appears to, almost even be just a tiny bit light there. So it probably did call for about 6.5. And, you can see the slider positioning that I had. What was that wind? Was it 11.8? I just want to kind of pull that up again. The difference between maybe, 10% or something, whatever that wind was, you can see, it can be substantial. What if it was 88%, 6.6, might have got me in the ballpark a little bit better, because you can see maybe I was just a little bit light, but I was also, trying to protect against getting too aggressive on the rough edge. So just keep that in mind when you're doing that. And also think about wind effect. The ball guide's going to have to be offset somewhat. So I'm trying to kind of reduce the amount of curling to keep it from kind of winding up to the left of the hole. All right, let's take a look at this one, see what it looks like. Oh, it's kind of a bit out of range, but that's okay. The first thing that you want to be thinking about here is, is this up, downhill? What's it look like? I'm going to try to kind of just go slightly into overpower here. You see, this is actually a rare exception. It's one of the few that are actually not downhill. So what I'm going to try to do, for precision, first off, I'm going to need to play wind effect. So I'm going to go at least 6-ish rings. I'm going to try to keep off the power somewhat just for precision. But you can see, that I'm going to still want to need just a little bit of overpower here and hopefully get close to perfect. It looks like I actually got perfect. So just make sure that, you're playing enough wind effect. Here you can see that it's coming in. It's still moving towards the left. So you can see I was still probably just a little bit light on the adjustment, even going to 6. I offset the ball guide, but it may not be enough. Keep in mind that this ball has an extremely high arc. The sand wedge has one of the most. Similarly, this is, I was kind of saying that this is one of the flatter. It could have been downhill as well. Plus 5% could have been the correct adjustment here. So you can see 6.5 rings plus, just a little bit more aggressive with my wind effect as well. So keep all those tips in mind, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. About that last shot, I did go into overpower. So when you do that, you can go as much as maybe 7% overpower. So you might want to use at least maybe a plus 5% in those situations. So first thing I'm going to do for this one, you're going to see that I'm going to see that it's uphill once again. Pretty common theme. We're going to need some kind of curl. You can see that I'm still over here towards the left of the hole, and especially with secondary wind effect, we're really going to need this ball curling quite a bit. But you can see right around maybe 6.5 is the adjustment. So, and maybe just a little bit of overpower yet again. So somewhere right in here. And you can see I called a great ball. Shouldn't really affect things too much. I wasn't playing super aggressive. Looks like I may just come a little bit short, but you can see the general idea is correct. And I might have just needed just a little bit more overpower than that. But the gist of the shot is, to kind of play it using the Golf Clash notebook numbers and always be thinking about things like wind effect, especially in situations like that where it's coming in hard from the side. You're going to see it really try to push that ball really hard to the left. All right, I'd like to just briefly talk here about green side bunker attempts here. So what I like to do, well, first off, I'm going to figure out the elevation. You can see -10 again, it's uphill. I like to use the divide in half method to kind of estimate my distance on shots like this. So you'll see there's maybe 50%, there's a quarter club, a little bit less. I'm thinking somewhere less than quarter club, so maybe 20%. Other than that, I'll need to be thinking about wind effect. So 20-ish% clobbered, so 1.1, 1.2 rings, and also wind effect, as I mentioned. So, you know, I may need to consider that, and you can see that's why I'm kind of putting it off to the side there, just slightly with the ball guide. Other than that, perfect balls are going to be critical, especially around the green. So there you can see I catch the perfect ball, and it's just barely too much. So, you know, it might not have been, you know, 22%, maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of, you know, 19, 18%. But you could see, especially with me talking, that I was very much rushing and doing a lot of things at one time. You know, could be a result as to why. And as I mentioned, you know, it was probably just maybe more like 17%. And I forget exactly what the wind is, but you could punch in the numbers and, you know, see probably it was maybe 1.0 rings. And just that little bit of overplay was what cost me that shot. But you'll see that you'll still be able to use that slider there, even around the green, especially if you can really get dialed with, you know, the way that you estimate distance. So good luck, and I'll see you guys on the next one. All right, let's take a look at this shot. This is going to be with Spitfire now. I want to do a couple, so we're going to kind of change pace here a little bit. Anytime that you have a slope like this, you'll see that this green's on a big slope. You have to watch about whether or not you pull down the slope. If you ever do, you need to kind of change your adjustment slightly. But you can see with where I put the ball, first thing I'm going to do is kind of size it up. I'm just going to go for a bump here. You can see it's maybe 60% club. You're going to want to check to see elevation. It looks relatively flat, maybe minus 5%, I'm thinking. And as I mentioned, the land zone, maybe about 60. So I'm thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 5 rings here. And let's just try to use this ball guide just a little bit. You'll see that I just kind of offset just slightly. Now I am moving down to lower ground, so I'm going to under adjust this. So that was probably what, 4.8 or so? Would have loved that perfect ball just to see how it worked out. But, you know, you can see that it's going to be relatively good. Even shooting over the water, I do want to talk about this a little bit. It usually is more related to where your start height is and where your land height is. So it might have marginally a little bit of extra wind effect down that hill. Like how it sinks down into the water, but it's going to be a very, very small amount. So it's not necessarily something you have to be too worried about. But you know, when you move the target, you can see that I was starting kind of high up on the hill and kind of moving just slightly down a little bit. The farther that I move down, the more that I have to under adjust intentionally. So since I only changed kind of slightly, I only kind of under adjusted maybe 5-10%, very, very small amount. But do keep that in mind for your shots. All right, let's take a look at this next one. So Spitfire. We're going to take a look here. First thing, I'm going to just find the distance. You can see maybe just slightly uphill. I'm thinking very, very small, 5%. You can see that probably going to be landing right around here, maybe 80-ish%, 80-something%. So keep that in mind and just try to match that up. 80-ish something, 7 some rings. Other than that, you need to be thinking about secondary wind effect. So you can see I'm going to aim significantly off towards the right-hand side here because there's going to be a lot, especially on a side wind. So right around 7 rings here. Let's take a look. Very slow with my timing. So I do expect this to come in towards the left, and sure enough, there you can see, you know, it maybe hop forward just a little bit too. I wasn't thinking about the headwind or the tailwind portion of that, so you can see that it kind of went through the hole as well. So always be thinking about that as well, because I should have set my guide up just a little bit shorter. But I'm also, you know, not trying to backspin because I want you guys to see the run out, so you can see that it just kind of, you know, kind of slowly runs out. So I really wasn't using any spin or anything to try to control it unless, you know, I have kind of a tight green or something. That's kind of the way that I choose to do that. But you can see there with a perfect ball, you know, you could see that I was over maybe 4 or 5 grids. Like, it's significant. So the biggest way that you're going to make mistakes by using the Golf Clash notebook is by not considering enough wind effect. You probably just don't realize that it's as significant as it is. So just keep that in mind, and I think you'll have great success. All right, let's take a look at this one. This is going to be a very, very interesting hole here because we got a nasty headwind. Next thing that you'll see is I might maybe just be slightly uphill, very, very little. Very, very little. It's probably 5% or under. Other than that, you know, you can see that I'm going to be pulling towards max. So I'm essentially just going to use the max ring number. Other than that, you'll need to be thinking about secondary wind effect. So you can see that I'm probably going to essentially be stretching through the hole here. I may not be able to get 10 rings here too easily either. So that's another thing to be thinking about because my power ball is so small. So it looks like I have 8 rings. I still need 2 of power. Plus I'm going to play some curl to just kind of negate some of that side wind. But there you can see I hit a great ball off towards the left. Probably going to end up missing left. But you can see this just shows you how dramatic that wind effect is. You can see I barely got to the green, straight in the face. But you can see that the notebook values are very, very true, especially with the wind direction. You'll just see that these adjustments are very, very good. It's much better than anything you've ever used to date. If you're having problems with it, there's more, you know, of a chance that you're just having problems with the methodology that you're going about setting them up. So review some of these cases, these videos that I'm showing you guys, and I think you guys are going to, you know, really be able to start to get a better grasp of how to do it. All right, let's take a look at this one. Now we just did this, so I'm going to set the same elevation here. You can see that I'll use that value. Next, I'm just going to kind of figure out, you know, where I am in the mid-max span here. I feel maybe around maybe 80-ish some percent. So somewhere around 5 some rings. Other than that, make sure that you're considering wind effect. So you can see that I'm offsetting that guide. Also making sure that it's kind of going up, hopefully, to the hole. Anytime that you have to move into the sand just a little bit, you may want to consider, you know, kind of under adjusting. However, in this situation, I'm just going to kind of go with it. But the more rings that you have to go and the lower you get into that sand, just be thinking about that. It looks like I just missed the perfect ball. And let's just take a look and see how this rolls out. It looks like it actually came up just a little bit short. And the biggest reason that it came up short is because when I move down to the lower ground like that, it makes the trajectory it changes the trajectory and your ball usually ends up landing short. So what I should have done there is I should have just pushed the target forward maybe 1 or 2 rings because of that drop off, because the initial bounce is going to land shorter. Additionally, I might have had just a little bit of a headwind as well. You can see that I had it kind of set up for headwind. So I probably should have put the ball guide just a little bit more aggressive as well. You'll see that the sand wedge, it really doesn't top-spin out of control. Even when when it comes in high, it lands very, very soft. So even with 4, whatever I use there, 4 topspin, you see it's still coming in very, very soft. So that's one of the reasons that, I don't think the guide is all that important, because you can get away with, a little bit of extra topspin from time to time because it's just naturally going to kind of check up on its own. So good luck with that technique, and just remember to kind of push that forward when you move down to lower ground. And if you move it up to higher ground, for example, you might want to pull back a ring because it's probably going to launch when it actually plays in the wind. All right, let's check out this shot here. So first thing, I'll just pull to max, see where that is. You can also see here uphill, so I'm thinking maybe minus 5%. I'll also try to figure out the land zone. You can see maybe somewhere down here around 60-ish%, give or take. I'm thinking. So somewhere down here, 3 some rings. I'm going to have to get relatively aggressive towards the left-hand side. You'll also see that I'm going to also need to maybe throw on just a slight amount of curl because I can't do my ball guide offset. So I am going to be moving down to lower ground here, so I'll probably just try to kind of pull at an angle a little bit because it's probably going to kind of change the way that it comes in. Other than that, I'll need to consider kind of the wind effect, and that's why I'm kind of trying to hit a little bit of a curl shot here. But it looks like, I kind of maybe hit just the fairway there. It's not very flat. So you can see that it needs to land almost precise, like very, very precise. It's very, very tough when you land on side hills like that. As you can see, it's just going to kind of change the pitch. So if I miss by even, half a ring, for instance, it's really, really going to cost you. But you can see, overall, it's very close to what I needed to have happen. You can see that it landed very, very similarly. It probably just landed just a little bit more left. Keep in mind, when you move down to lower ground, you'll have to kind of under adjust your rings kind of intentionally, because the trajectory changes. It comes in lower, which means that there's less wind effect. So it won't play like, a standard -5% in that case. It's going to have less. So you'll want to go just a fraction under, I'll usually take off maybe 5 or 10% on a slope like that. If it's more drastic, then maybe I'll take off even more. Sometimes I'll take off, 20% adjustment. Just depends on the severity of the slope. And for the most part, you'll see that it's more gentle like this one. So, make sure that you're under adjusting, as I mentioned. Other than that, when you move down to lower ground, I just touched on this last video, you probably want to make sure that you're pushing forward just a little bit, because the ball will land short. So that's why you saw me also kind of come up a little bit short, and I tried to correct for it here. And you can see that it's still kind of, didn't want to roll out. So you do got to just be a little bit careful about that. All right, let's take a look at this sand wedge here. You can see we did draw a tailwind. First thing that I'll do is try to size this up. Next, it's really tough to tell with the bunker face here. I'm thinking, either 0, +0, or maybe -5%. Keep in mind with the tailwind scenario, you can see I'm maybe 80% club, but I'm going to be pulling down maybe just a little bit less. So I'll need to make sure that I adjust my slider. I'm thinking maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 70%. And you can see that this fairway is all over the place. It's going to be almost impossible. You'll want to keep the ball guide short just a little bit. You can see right around 5-ish rings. Keep in mind, I'm moving down to lower ground. I'm going to under adjust my rings here. If you don't under adjust your rings when you move down to lower ground, it's probably not going to work out the way that you want. You can actually see I did relatively good there. Was almost able to actually hold that one, even with the great ball. Very, very curved fairway. So, it really required kind of, lucky break on the bounce more so than anything, because you could see as I was sliding up, it was all over the place on the fairway. So you just need to kind of hit that nice landing zone where it actually deflects towards the hole. But be thinking about things like wind effect all the time. And if you pull down to lower ground like that, you could see it said 5.5. You can see that I moved more like 5 rings, and it was relatively spot on. And that's the big reason for the underplay, is because I moved to lower ground. It's going to cause the ball to change trajectory. It's going to come in lower. And on top of that, it's also going to land short of the target, because of the fact when you pull down toward the lower ground, it's just the way that the game mechanics work. Similarly, if I move up to higher ground, it's probably going to carry farther. The rate that it's going to change is going to be dependent upon how severe the slope was. You could see that my slope there was relatively severe. So you can be sure that the lower you moved into the water there, the harder that the wind is going to kind of resist taking that full effect. So you have to under adjust even more. If I would have moved it into the water, I might want to under adjust by a full ring there. All right, let's take a look at this shot right here. You can see I got a nasty headwind here. So what I would typically do is set up my club. I'll usually take a look at the elevation. You can see it's relatively uphill, so 13.3. This direction, at least 6 rings, we're pretty much going to be pulling towards max. And a shot like this, you'll probably just want to full top spin. And, no reason I shouldn't be using the max ring value here. And I'm also going to try to play wind effect. So you can see that I'm going to just slight curl back here. And more than anything, you just try to blast it down here, and you can see with the Spitfire, it gives you a good chance to be able to get to the hole, and you can see, put yourself in a good position.